Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here and be able to talk about some of our research on three federal initiatives, all intended to address different aspects of violent crime. There we go. Specifically, I want to talk about these three initiatives that have received programmatic training and technical assistance and research support from the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the National Institute of Justice. In particular, we'll be talking about Project Safe Neighborhoods that you've heard mentioned. As many of you probably know, this was an initiative that began in 2001. It remains operational, although at a much lower level of funding, and is coordinated through the U.S. Attorney's offices, the 94 U.S. Attorney's offices that cover the United States. The Comprehensive Anti-Gang Initiative was rolled out between 2007 and 2009 in 12 U.S. Attorney's offices covering 18 cities. And the drug market intervention actually began through an effort in the High Point, North Carolina. Then several additional cities picked up on this initiative, and on reports from some success in these cities, the Bureau of Justice Assistance launched a training and technical assistance program. There are now about 30 cities participating in that initiative. The commonality across these three initiatives is that they follow what I would refer to as a focused deterrence approach, similar to what Anthony described in the opening. And they all begin with that upfront analysis, or at least were intended to begin with that upfront analysis to try to understand those people, places, and contexts driving gun violence in particular jurisdiction that can then support this kind of focused effort on specific characteristics of the crime problem. And the ultimate goal is to change the perceived risk of arrest and sanction for these behaviors. They also all sought to expand enforcement resources through partnerships of local, state, and federal law enforcement. And ultimately, in picking up on Chris's point, they all included an emphasis on the role of federal prosecution for illegal gun carrying and gun use. So in terms of our evaluation of these three initiatives, with Project Safe Neighborhoods, we looked at all U.S. cities, the violent crime trend in all U.S. cities of 100,000 population or more, and compared the PSN target cities with other U.S. cities. In a second stage of the analysis, we also considered measures of the implementation dosage, or you can think about this as the treatment dosage within these cities. So at this first stage, what we found were that the PSN target cities had a greater decline in violent crime compared to other U.S. cities, and this was statistically significant and controlling for a number of characteristics of the cities. The second stage took into account the level of implementation, and as you can see up here, the kind of ultimate comparison was between PSN target cities and high implementation districts. You can think about this as the high treatment sites experienced a 13% decline in violent crime. And in contrast, the non-target cities and low implementation districts, or the non-treatment sites, experienced an 8% increase in violent crime over this time period. Here's another way of looking at this, and this is just using the level of federal prosecution of gun crime as one of the implementation measures. And you can see that in the high prosecution sites, you had a much more dramatic and sustained decline in violent crime compared to these other cities. The KG Evaluation took a very similar approach in a two-step process where the 18 KG cities were compared to other U.S. cities of similar size. And then in the second stage, we took a sample of those other cities that were matched based on city characteristics that are known to relate to levels of violent crime. In the first stage, the KG cities did experience a greater decline in violent crime, although the comparison was not statistically significant. However, when you took into account the level of enforcement, the implementation of enforcement across these cities, then we saw that the KG cities with high enforcement intensity had a 15% decline that was statistically significant compared to the other cities. The drug market intervention follows many of the same strategies and principles and seeks to eliminate open-air drug markets and therefore deal with crime and disorder associated with those markets and tries to restore a sense of community in those neighborhoods. To date, there have been 3 case studies of this approach, all of which have shown significant declines in crime. There are some inconsistencies across these cities when you compare property, violent, and drug-related crime. And currently, the National Institute of Justice has sponsored an evaluation being conducted by the RAND Corporation of the DMI approach. So to wrap this up and conclude, I think it's very consistent with what you heard from Anthony and Chris, and that what we see here is that these highly focused and targeted enforcement strategies appear to hold significant promise in reducing levels of violent crime. But implementation becomes absolutely critical. And when we went and tried to interview officials in some of these high implementation areas and low implementation areas, one of the things that they talked about was the suggestion that federal funding could be coupled with some assessment process early on, and that those jurisdictions with a lower level of capacity for implementing these kind of strategies would benefit through a strategic planning process that would allow them to build the partnerships and do the kind of upfront analysis that Anthony talked about that would support the implementation of these initiatives. And kind of related to that, I think our sense also in trying to do these evaluations were that capacity building would also support high quality research and evaluations that could generate this kind of evidence-based practice. So thank you.